Hey everybody, this is Phil Galfond for RunItOnce.com. Today, as you can see, I'm going to be reviewing a heads-up no-limit session, 5100, against Canu 7 or Kanu 7. You'll have to stay tuned till the end of the series, where I will find out the correct pronunciation of his name. I'm going to probably call him both of those things. Anyways, Kanu is widely considered at least one of the top few heads-up no-limit players. I'm not all that familiar with his game. Still, at the time of this match, this was actually a little while ago, I was not at all familiar with his game. And furthermore, I had not played Heads Up No Limit in quite a long time. Since then, I played a couple more matches. This was kind of in preparation for that 100K Heads Up Superstar Showdown on PokerStars.com. I played this along with another match in preparation for that, and then I spent a lot of time during the tournament as I played, one super long day and another pretty long day. I spent a lot of time thinking about Heads Up No Limit. So actually, I think that I know it sounds weird, but I think my game after the tournament was a lot stronger than it was before the tournament, even though it was just a couple days of playing. But anyways, I'm sure that I will see a lot of plays in here that I don't agree with or I think are mistakes. And there'll be some spots where I'm a little confused about just because I don't know so much about his game still and his ranges, and I also just am out of practice a little bit with No Limit, but I still think some interesting hands will come up, and we can talk about some interesting concepts, and hopefully we can all learn a little bit from it. As I decided to review this today. Today is Thursday, January 24th, and it's going to be the first day of the NBC Heads Up Championship. I think that's what it's called. But I'm excited to play my first round matchups, Maria Ho, and I play in about 4 hours. So I thought I'd get my mind kind of back into Heads Up No Limit, even though it's kind of a turbo that we're playing for NBC Heads Up. It still will be nice for me to think a little bit about Heads Up, and also I just think this would be a good video. There's some good footage to review. I originally recorded this for just my own personal studying purposes. I never got around to doing that. I find it tedious to review hand histories or like comb through my database, but a little less tedious to review some footage. And so yeah, I thought that recording this match could potentially give me something to work on for my Heads Up No Limit game. I never got around to it, and now I'm using it for you guys. On the left table, I defend 8-5 offsuit. I think that I think it's close, and I'm curious to hear what you Heads Up No Limit players think. I know that some people feel you should defend almost every hand, at least a few people that I know. And then others play a lot more tight. If I were not to defend this, I think it'd be a good hand to 3-bet. When I used to play Heads Up No Limit when people would 3x, it's a lot easier to come up with kind of hands in my 3-bet bluff range because it would be hands that were pretty decent or kind of playable, but I just couldn't call 3x, like let's say Jack 6 suited. At least I don't think that I should call a 3x, at least back then when people were not opening near 100%. Anyways, before I get too far off, I'm not so sure about the defend, but I don't think it's a huge deal. Yeah, I guess I was going to talk a little bit about pre-flop. It kind of went in phases. People were opening 100% of buttons for a while. You'll notice Ken has been 2xing. I've been 2.27xing. That is, I wouldn't say that there's a very strong reason why I prefer that. I think it gives you a little bit more fold equity against weaker players, although Ken is obviously not a weaker player, or a little bit more than it should. Obviously, it should give you a tiny bit more than min-raising because their pot odds are a little bit worse. But I think that, especially if he's used to people who 2x, it might throw a tiny curveball at him, although obviously not much. My understanding now is that people are opening, I don't know, 85, 90% rather than 100, and people are obviously 3-betting quite a bit. I mean, I did quite a bit in this match, at least, and I think that when people are opening that wide, and you're at 100 big blinds, you do need to 3-bet a good amount. I mean, first of all, just to push your equity and playability edge with your big hands, and then also for fold equity, for immediate fold equity against their weak range. I guess that's all I'll say about it for now. So on the left table, we flop gets checked through. We flop bottom pair, and I opt to bet the turn. I think you could really go either way. I think that I tend to prefer betting here. I think he will call me with some king highs, although I don't think I can value bet the river, certainly. But I also don't really like check calling and turning my hand a little bit face up, and allowing him to bet a pretty wide range of value bets and bluffs on the river, and kind of pick up a lot of equity in this pot, both with either getting value from his value hands or winning more pots than he would if he didn't know how weak my hand were. That said, I could check call with some stronger hands to induce bluffs. But I started the match, obviously not knowing his check back ranges. I started the match leading out a lot of turns when the flop got checked through. And the plan was kind of to do this until he started raising turns, or very noticeably was checking back, top pair or kind of trappy hands to induce. Because I think that just in general, anytime you have some kind of equity, if you have some fold equity on the turn, it works out pretty well to bet. And if he has a queen here and I bet, it's not really a total disaster. I have 5 outs, and at the same time, he likely would bet if check 2, and I probably would call. And bottom pair isn't really a hand I love to induce bluffs with, because he's going to have so much equity with all of his bluffs for the most part. I think that, and this is something actually I did a ton of in my heads-up matches versus Ben 86 and Jungle Man, was checking back and raising turns. I think it's very important to introduce into your game with a somewhat balanced range for a lot of reasons, but yeah, I mean, kind of for obvious reasons. It makes it very difficult for them to play their hands out of position. So, for example, the hand I just played, I was able to pick up a pot with, almost certainly the best hand, but he definitely had some equity, and prevented myself from getting bluffed, potentially. If I'm up against somebody who's checking back at least a reasonable amount of strong hands and is raising turns, decent frequency, that bet's not going to work out very well for me. And the same is true for kind of weak or even strongish draws. It gets a little awkward unless I have to start. I guess I can start 3-betting turns with some of my draws and some of my weaker hands as well. But it's really important, I think, to be able to do that, and it's very important to check back some strong hands so that you can raise turns, because not only are you going to induce some bluffs or some, thin turn bets, and then potentially they'll pay off a raise and a river bet, or potentially they'll just fold, which is also fine if they were going to fold flop. You also allow yourself to credibly rep strong hands when you don't have strong hands. And I guess actually, I won't talk too much more about it now. It's something that I did not employ, I believe, in this match, and something I kind of figured out or thought of before and during the heads up, whatever it was called. So on the right table, I've checked down Queen Jack. By reputation, my understanding of Kanu is that he's very balanced and potentially even, kind of focused on game theory. And what that means to me is that on 966, he's never folding king high to a c-bet. He's certainly, obviously never folding ace high, probably never folding king high. I have the nut queen high. So I think I only pick up pots against air, but on 966, a lot of quote-unquote air contains a gutter. I'm not going to list all the gutters, but you guys can figure it out. And then same is true on the turn. I don't think that ace high's folding. Potentially king high could fold on the turn. I'm not sure, but every other hand, it's just very hard for him to have air unless it's just like his jack 4 type hands, which I am winning against anyways. He bets river on the 7. It's actually a little bit interesting. I don't think he would bet ace high, king high. I would have expected him to potentially lead turns with probably 9x. I don't know if he would with 3x. Obviously, sometimes with 6x, but other times he'd go for the check raise. But what's interesting is I think I would expect him to lead turns with a lot of his 10-7, 10-8, 8-7 type hands. So for him to have improved, I guess I'm not really sure what type of hand makes the most sense, other than some kind of slow play, or potentially he was going to turn check raise or check raise turn with a draw, or he can just have king seven, which actually makes a ton of sense and would be an extremely standard way to play this hand. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think calls are reasonable. I feel like my instinct would be to fold just because of how poorly our hand does against any two cards. We're in very bad shape against a random hand. And in general, you shouldn't base all your decisions on that because their range is more specific than just any two cards by the way they play it. Like I said, he's not betting a better high card, I assume. But yeah, a lot of things have to go right for me to win this. So I guess it's a fold. I see bet on the left table. This is actually a flop I think I would oftentimes check back and give up now, with my absolutely no equity hand, and aboard that dynamic. It's just difficult. I mean, it's certainly not impossible for him to be folding, but I think my understanding is that he's not going to be folding enough to make it immediately profitable, or I'm certain that he's not going to fold enough to make it immediately profitable, and I'm not going to be comfortable double barreling on pretty much any cards. I mean, like even my best double barrel card, I guess, which is an 8. Yes, I pick up some equity, but I don't think he's folding many hands on an 8. Just because anything that could call the flop likely improved or potentially could turn their hand into a check raise bluff. So I think I just should give up immediately, and potentially, you can find a stab later in the hand, but don't really like my c-bet there. And actually, I think it'll be important to look at his hands and talk about them here. I guess my HUD's a little funky, but his hand was Queen 8 of spades. He check called on King 10-7, and I think that's incredibly standard. As far as betting the river, it's something he could do. I think I might bet the river in his shoes, given that, yeah, all the low straight draws missed, which he potentially could have floated with. I mean, certainly 8-9 he could have just called. I don't even consider that a float, but like 8-6, Jack 8.